Hey folks, Dustin Zarni here. Wonderful Sunday afternoon. We're going to do another segment of Commissioner in a Car. And I'm just going to wait for people to log in, see if people have any questions. Lots to go on this Sunday, and we haven't talked since January or so, when all these election reforms passed the New York State Assembly, and I've been busy trying to make sure that Onondaga County is taken care of. Lots of stuff with early voting, but we're not done with election reform because there's a lot of stuff that's passed in the New York State budget as well. So that's exciting, and I'm excited by it. But also there's a lot of things just going on, period, because this is petition week here in central New York, and actually throughout New York State. It's a little early, so we're going to go over that today as well. As always, like and share this so people can see it. The purpose of these commissioners of the cars are to maybe get, lift the veil of election law and make sure that people can know what's going on in the world of New York State elections, and also here in Onondaga County. And also make sure that if you like and share it, then other people are going to see it, and they're going to get the answers. And if you have any questions, hit it right there in the comments. I'll be happy to answer any questions. If it's on the stream, I'll try to answer them live. If not, I'll try to answer them in the comments later on. But we're going to just share this a couple times here, give people a little more chance to log in and see what's going on, and then we can start talking about the wonderful world of elections, because there's a lot of stuff going on. So give it a couple more minutes. It's just started to be about 4 o'clock right now, and it's so people are starting to log in. I see a few people have logged in already. Again, any questions you want, hit them in the comments. But first, I'm going to start with Petition Week. April 1st through the 4th is Petition Week here in New York State. This is earlier than it was in the past. It used to be in the middle of July, because earlier this year, New York State moved the primary to the end of June instead of the beginning of September. Now the petition week, the petition turn-in week, is now April 1st through the 4th. This is the earliest I've seen it, and I think, but this is the new normal. This is when we find out what races we're going to have here in Onondaga County, and what candidates, at least between the major parties and the recognized parties. So between April 1st and the 4th, all of the parties have to submit petitions to have most of their candidates on the ballot. The exceptions are some towns that do caucuses for their town candidates only. Those will happen sometime in the middle of July. A couple on the Republican side, about 17 or so on the, or actually it's less, like 14 or 15 or so on the Democratic side towns. You can go to our website at ongov.net/elections, and it has a breakdown on there under candidate information, which towns are caucuses, which towns are petition towns, but for which party, because it's different by party. So we have a few slates yet to be determined for the major parties, but by April 4th, we should know who our candidates are. The Board of Elections will be open at 9. Actually, we'll be open at 8:30 every day, but we can't start taking petitions till 9 a.m. on Monday. That's the way the law is written. So we can't start taking them, even though we're open. If you come in with petitions, we're going to tell you to wait until 9 o'clock, because that's what the law says. And then we will be open at 5 o'clock on April 4th. As always, don't wait. Come down. Get it done early. It's actually more advantageous for you to have your petitions turned in early, because it cuts off the time that people can challenge your petitions. So if you've met your minimum, and more than your minimum, I hope, if you've had double your minimum, you should bring them down. Get them filed. Get it done with. If this year, because the calendar was changed, they reduced the number of signatures. Again, right on our website, ongov.net/elections. Go under candidate information. We have the reduced amount of signatures for the designating petitions, which are the major party petitions. They're reduced for this year only because it's brand new that we're doing this so early this year. So if you are trying to get in your petitions, you need some help, call the Board of Elections. We'll be able to go over it. If you show up at 4:30 on the 4th, we won't have as much time to take a look at them before they get in. So we're there to serve all voters, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter, green, whatever. So if there's any petitions you want to turn in that are that you want us to take a look over to make sure that you're passing the physical requirements. Hopefully you've already done that with us before now, but if you're doing it, make sure you give us some time to look it over and make an appointment. Give us a call. We'll be happy to look it over before it gets turned in, just to make sure no technical issues. If you don't get enough signatures, there's nothing I can do to help you. We're very fair there at the board. It's very hard to knock off a petition. And the times that we've knocked off petitions is because the people weren't going door to door. They were standing on street corners. That kind of stuff is usually, or they just get a little bit over the minimum and they don't have enough because somebody made a mistake, and then they usually get thrown off. So make sure that you're out there, and you have all the tools you need to turn in your petitions if you're a candidate. So I don't see any real questions about petitions, but if there are any, hit them right there in the comment field, even after the video's done, because I'll be more than happy to address it. So let's talk about election reform, my favorite topic. I love it. This has been an amazing 4 months of election reforms. And already we have seen a host of election reforms in New York State. Just a flood of election reforms. In fact, a lot of these election reforms had passed the Assembly, but been held up in the Senate, or some other holdups where usually it was the Senate. But when the Senate came in, there was still a lot of question whether the governor and the senators and the Assembly people could get together and pass these reforms. And I got to be honest, they've gone beyond a lot of my wildest dreams to get stuff done this year. Here is what got passed in January. Remember, in January, first day of the Senate, they passed early voting. They passed a unified primary, having one primary and moving it from September to June. They passed the universal transfers. What does that mean? That means if you're in New York State and you want to move from county to county, your registration goes with you now, and that's effective this year. This is a big change. I know people think it's kind of in the weeds, but it's a big change that people aren't talking about it, because it's going to make tracking people for when they move a lot more easier for the voter. Not for us, but for the voter. And it's also going to register a lot more people. There's going to be a lot more people who don't understand that just because they move across county lines, their registration is canceled. They're going to take that registration with them now when they update with their DMV or whatever. Big change. And it's a lot of work, but it's really going to be good. Now, and also they passed a couple constitutional amendments in January to go to same-day registration, which allows people to register to vote on the day of the election, and no-fault absentees. Instead of having to say that you have an excuse, or you're sick, you won't have to have a reason to get an absentee ballot. These are constitutional amendments, so the earliest that they will be implemented is 2022. A lot of time before those. So that's what's happened in January. Between January and the budget, I'm not even talking about the budget, other things were passed. The Voter-Friendly Ballot Act, which is going to make the ballots a lot easier to read. They're going to make them a lot more intuitive for the voters. And it's also going to save us some money at the boards of elections. That's a big thing. It's passed both the Assembly and the Senate, and we're waiting for the governor to be given to the governor sometime after the budget. He's going to sign it. This is a huge thing. This will be effective next year, but it's a huge thing. Oh, another thing that got passed in January was pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds. That's different than the lowering the voting age, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But pre-registration, which means they can get registered to vote, but they can't vote till they're 18. That was passed, and it's effective next year, and that'll be big because when people get their driver's license, they're usually 16 years old. They'll be able to register to vote, and the registration will be there and ready to go right once when they turn 18. So between January and April, the Voter-Friendly Ballot Act, that's a big thing. There's some other legislation that hasn't quite passed yet, and we'll go over that in a little bit. But in the budget, big changes coming to New York. First off, they're funding early voting and they're funding electronic poll books. Electronic poll books is actually being passed with the budget. I didn't mention that because it's actually not passed yet, but it's being passed with the budget. And one of the reasons they waited until the budget to pass it is because they wanted funding to go along with it. I believe it's over 15 million. It may be up to 17 million. I'm waiting to see the bill that is dedicated just for counties to convert from paper poll books to electronic poll books. This is huge. This is something I've been pushing for a very long time, even without early voting. Instead of having those paper books at the poll books that people have to look up their name and maybe they spell it wrong, now you'll have electronic poll books, little tablets. You'll be able to see any voter wherever they are in the county and be able to direct them to the right polling place if they're at the wrong one. Be able to find out whether they need an affidavit ballot, whether they need a court order without even calling the Board of Elections. Everything's going to be on site at every one of the 179 poll places in Onondaga County. We are planning a full conversion in Onondaga County from paper poll books to electronic poll books, but we've been waiting for the budget. And now that the budget's here, we have grant money, and some of the money is going to come from that grant money. Some of it will come from whatever New York State gives us. The details of how much each county is going to get we're going to find that out over the next month or so. Now, it's not going to cover it all. It never was. But it's covering a significant portion of it. And it's going to help some of the big counties that have lots of polling stations that have to go to electronic poll books to be able to do early voting, and help them convert. And why do they have to? Because early voting ends on a Sunday. And we have to get ready for Election Day on a Tuesday. Otherwise, we're going to have to print all these poll books overnight because we'd have to have the voter history of everybody who voted early updated in the poll book so they can't vote again on Election Day. Also, the electronic poll books have to be on a closed circuit. So in big counties like Onondaga County, where we're going to have 6 electronic early voting sites, maybe more, they have to be live so somebody can't go from site A, get in their car, drive down to site B, and vote on the same day. All of these poll books are going to be able to do that. There's vendors that have been doing this across the country. 40 or 45, states use some version of electronic poll books. So this is very important, and it's very a big step. It's going to modernize our Election Day outfit. So that got passed in the budget. Also, early voting was already passed. It's already law. But they also passed, I think, $10 million to help the counties, offset some of the costs of early voting. Why is this important? Well, it's always important to help the counties with their budgets. But more important this year, when this was passed, county budgets are already set. We fund elections on a county-by-county level here in New York State. And those budgets were set last year, not knowing that we were going to have early voting. So many of the extra costs for inspectors and I'm not even talking about equipment. I'm just talking about inspectors and printing and all of that. That was not covered. So that $10 million, which is higher than what it was last year when the governor put in the budget of $7 million, is going towards the county. So the legislature and the governor, big kudos to them because they listened to commissioners, both Democrat and Republican, that were giving them information about how much this was going to cost us. They went from 0 to now, between electronic poll books and early voting, around 27, close to $30 million statewide. Is it going to cover everything? Absolutely won't. It just won't. the county taxpayers are still going to have to foot some of this bill, as they do with all elections. That's another discussion that we have to have about how we fund elections and why we ask the counties to pay for everything, yet they don't have control over anything. So I think we should, have New York State funding for at least parts of the elections, because we shouldn't leave it up to each county to decide what is fair. That's a state level of service. Every voter in New York State should get the same service. However, if we're going to mandate that, we should have funds to go along with that. Another thing that was in the budget, besides electronic poll books and the funding for early voting, is standard primary hours. Now, this will not take effect till next year. It is not in effect in June. However, as you know, in Onondaga County, our primary hours are noon to 9 instead of 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. New York City, Erie County, and about 4 or 5 other counties are all 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. On Election Day and on primary day. This has caused confusion for many, many years, especially next year with the presidential election. I remember in 2016, so many people were showing up at their polling places at 6 a.m. wanting to vote, but the polls by law could not open till noon. I couldn't change it if I wanted to. This is big. This is going to, again, reduce confusion throughout the state. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, for the local primaries, maybe it's a little bit overkill, and I understand that. But this uniformity is good too. And having one time throughout the state that the polls are opening and closing will keep people, in a transient society. They may be moving across county lines. One county does 6 a.m., one county does noon. It's very confusing, especially since primaries don't happen all that often. It's more important than ever to make sure everything is the same. So 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. That's something that happened in the budget. Online voter registration is in the budget. This probably won't be effective until 2020 at the earliest, maybe 2021, because this is so new that now the county boards, right now you can do online voter registration at the DMV, but now the county boards, on my website, on the county website, we can have a form that you fill out and you can get registered to vote. We verify you through the DMV, we verify you through Social Security, just like we normally do. And we have to find a way to get your electronic copy of your signature, either from DMV or maybe on Election Day when you go to sign in. By the way, those electronic poll books, they record signatures. I know, I'm geeking out. I'm sorry. But we're putting the tools in place this year for this to work next year. It's really good forward thinking by the governor, by the legislature, to make this possible. The state board is going to be doing research on this. I hope to be a part of it myself, on how to implement this. But again, it's not just having people who only have driver's license or people who have My DMV accounts. You'll be able to go to county websites and fill out a form and register to vote. The details will be coming, but that's a big thing. Another thing, they eliminated lobbyists being able to loan to campaigns. That's a huge thing. Loans are some of the most unregulated parts of campaign finance, because it's not a contribution, so it can exceed the minimum contribution limit amounts, and there's no terms of when loans have to be paid back for. Now they're saying to lobbyists, you can't make a loan to a campaign. A registered lobbyist cannot make a loan to any campaign. That's a big thing. Another thing that got passed was a constitutional amendment to lower the voting age range from 18 to 16. I don't have a personal opinion on this. I'm of two minds. And I want to see how this plays out. This, again, it's a constitutional amendment, so it won't be, it has to get passed again in 2021, and then the voters have to pass it. For earliest implementation, this could be as 2022. I'm of two minds, I'll be honest. I believe you need to be an adult to be a voter. And 18 is our age of maturity that we've agreed to in this country. So lowering the voting age range is something that I'm not so sure I'm in favor of. I'm not necessarily against it. I want to hear the arguments. This kind of came out of nowhere, and I'd like to see how this debate shapes over the next couple of years. Because again, it has to be passed again, and it has to get passed by the voters before it gets passed. So there's a lot of debate that needs to go into this. I understand, that there are decisions being made that 16 and 17-year-olds are going to live with for the rest of their lives right now. And many 16 and 17-year-olds are mature enough and educated enough to make valid decisions in voting. So I'm not taking away from that at all. But also implementation is going to be weird, because unless the federal age range goes down, they won't be able to vote on president. They may not be able to vote on Congress or Senate. So that means that we'd have to have special ballots at polling places that are just for 16 and 17-year-olds, and they're not allowed to vote in those races. I'm a little worried about how to carry that out. But we got 4 years to figure that out. I want to see what the details are. Those are some of the ones that are out there. And also they expanded the number of hours and made sure that you can get paid for voting on election day. It went from 2 to 3 hours. Many people don't know this. If your employer, if you're working on election day, your employer has to give you 3 hours of written or of paid time off to go vote. If you ask them in advance, you have to ask them in advance, about a week in advance, and you have to be able to say that you cannot make the polling places before or after your shift. It has to be during your shift. This is not well known, and it's something that we have to do a better job about getting that information out there. But it expanded it from 2 to 3 hours. So that's a good thing. The whole thing about state holiday, that never really made it into the budget. There's a lot of problems with that because of union issues with union agreements that have certain days off. So the state holiday for elections, I'm in favor of that. That did not happen in the budget. But this is in place of that, is to give expanded time to get paid time off. Another thing that is in the budget is a commission for fair elections. This is a commission. This is the public financing of elections, on par with what happens in New York City, where there's small donor matching amounts to combat money in politics. They have made a binding commission that will study the issue and make recommendations by December 2019, and those recommendations are binding. It's not everything. It's not everything that the people who were fighting for fair elections wanted, but it is something, and it's a binding commission. Again, this commission will be making the decision, not the legislature, of how to set up a public financing commission. So that's important, and it's something that I think that will be interesting to watch over the next year. So those are the things that have made it into the budget for election reform. But there's still more to come, by the way, because there's a lot of things that are happening in Albany that didn't quite make it as part of the budget, but we still got 2 more months of session. Automatic voter registration, that seems to be a lot of big discussions about that in an end of session bill that maybe could be in effect for next year. Let's see here, what else? There's a lot of other things like there's still the discussion on fusion voting. That seems to be out there, and it's a important step for us, I believe, to have that discussion about how we're one of only 3 states that allow candidates to be on multiple party lines. That's still out there. That still needs to be taken up. And I do think that sometime over the next, either this session or early next session, we'll be talking about petition reform, how we get our candidates on the ballot, how what's going on this next week, whether that's beneficial to the voters and the modern voters, or whether there can be another way, and how we finance our elections There's been a lot of talk about unfunded mandates, and in many counties that were very upset about early voting. They say because it was about the money, some of that, should be resolved in the budget. But also, how we fund elections. Is it fair that certain counties have less resources per voter than other counties based on the financial health of the county that's out there? That's, we are all New York State voters. We should all have at least a bare minimum of resources that are available to us, regardless of county budgets. But to make it regardless of county budgets, you need New York State funds to do that. So I think that's a discussion I plan on having, and then moving on to more, over the next 4 to 5 years, moving on to more election day reforms, such as voting centers where people can just show up at any polling place and vote, no matter where their ballot is, because you'll have on-demand ballot printing. You're going to see that with early voting this year of the 6 sites in Onondaga County. We're going to have on-demand ballot printing. Should we make that happen on election day? It's 4 or 5 years down the road, but hey, we've been fighting this fight for early voting. We've been fighting this fight for electronic poll books for 8 years. Now this is happening. So now that it happens, we got to start having the discussion for the next wave of electoral reforms. And that's going to start happening as well. But boy, it's really exciting. I'm really excited. I can't wait to implement these things. And I hope that you'll be as patient as possible. By May 1st, Onondaga County will announce our 6 early voting sites. We've visited about 20 or so sites that we feel are capable and able to handle it. We'll also have to be, now that electronic poll books is passed and we know the money, we're going to probably sometime in May start looking at a vendor for that. This is a $1 million conversion, so it's a big conversion. We're going to be crossing every T, dotting every I, and making sure the voters and taxpayers of Onondaga County are taken care of. But with the money that's set aside in the budget and with state grants, it looks like we'll be able to do that without any money needed from Onondaga County to do that. So that's a big thing. That's something that we've been planning for years. A few years back, Onondaga County was at the vanguard. We piloted an electronic poll book, and we're really excited to be able to convert everything this year as well. So that's it. I don't see any questions here on this Commissioner in the Car, but that's okay. It's a Sunday afternoon. It's snowing out in April 1st in Onondaga County. Hey, welcome to spring, everyone. But that's okay. I know a lot of people are out there getting their last minute petitions and getting ready for petition week. That's like Shark Week for us commissioners. So this is the busiest time of the year besides an election for us. So we're really excited for that. And as always, the staff at the Board of Elections on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, they're incredible. They're ready to work hard, and they're going to really help a lot of people this week. They've been helping people all throughout the petition period to be ready. And I think we're going to see some primaries in Onondaga County, and that's okay. The next Commissioner Car next Sunday, I will be outlining, that's what that will be about, is where the races are happening in Onondaga County this year, because we'll know. And so thank you very much for tuning in to Commissioner in the Car. As always, leave a question and I'll answer it later, or message me or whatever. Hope you share the video so other people can see what's going on there. It's an exciting time for election reform in New York State. I'm excited by it. I hope you are too. Bye-bye.